I do want to prepare you for what you might be coming into. This is not to discourage you. This is not to make you change your mind. But I do want you to know that the higher ed that you knew pre-COVID right now doesn't really exist. Hey guys, it's Sabby Sabs. I am back with another video for you. So about a year ago, I can't believe it's been a year already, I did a video called Work in Higher Ed, where I gave people tips and advice who were interested in working in higher education. Now, ever since I've posted that video, I have received a lot of comments and emails coming in asking me if I can expand on that a little bit, or if I can go a little bit further to talk about like what it's like working in higher ed in more detail. And then it hit me that higher ed is so different now post-COVID. So I figured I would do an update of that video to tell you exactly what higher ed is like now post-COVID. So before I get started, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and don't forget to share to your friends as well. And then I'll get right into what higher ed is like now post-COVID. Gotta grab my tea for this one. So looking at higher ed now post-COVID, I do want to tell you something, a couple of things that are important for those of you looking to work in higher ed. The first thing is the job search in higher ed. If you have been applying for jobs in higher ed and you haven't received any feedback, or you haven't received any interview like invites, don't worry, it's not you. It has 0% to do with you and 100% to do with what is going on in higher ed financially post-COVID. So when we talk about finances for higher ed, universities took a big hit this year because of COVID. Students that usually would have stayed on campus, some of those students had the option to be remote and work at home, or they decided to come to class in person, Can't talk today, it must be the tea. Some universities decided to go 100% remote, and some universities said, let's do a hybrid model where students can choose if they want to come in person or if they want to stay at home with mom and dad and do the classes remotely. So financially, that hit universities pretty hard, because students that would have been staying in campus on dorms or in dorms, you're basically cutting that number in half. So universities have lost money due to students choosing not to stay on campus because of COVID. So when the money goes down, you have to make cuts. And for some universities, they have chosen to furlough people. Some people have been laid off. And some universities simply said, you know what? We're not going to do furloughs or layoffs, but we are going to implement a hiring freeze. So this is part of the reason why, if you are searching for a job in higher ed and you don't see any new positions being posted at the schools you're applying to, they probably have a hiring freeze. Some universities have implemented this on their websites. They'll actually say at the top of the website that they have a hiring freeze. Not all of them have done that, and not all schools are affected by this. For example, like I said, funding. So funding is everything with universities. Schools that have large endowments, for the most part, they're going to be okay. So if you look at a college like MIT, they will still post new positions because they have a very, very large endowment. And in higher ed, endowments are everything. But what does that mean for some of the other colleges that don't have those large endowments? Some of those colleges are really suffering like tremendously right now. Like I said, they've had to do layoffs, furloughs. They had to take like hiring freezes. And for some, we don't know when the hiring freeze is going to end. So if you're still applying, and I know some of you have reached out to me and said like you're still trying to get a job in higher ed, which I felt like pre-COVID was difficult anyway if you didn't have experience in higher ed. It is not easy to get a job in higher ed. I'm just going to put that out there. But anyway, it's not you. So I don't want you to feel like there's something that you're doing wrong per se. It's just that right now it is really hard for universities to take on like new people when they don't have the funding. If they have the funding, and you'll know this because you'll see that those are the schools that are steadily posting new positions. So just be aware of that. I recommend that if you are applying, pay close attention to the date the job was posted. If the job was posted post-COVID, go ahead and apply for it. If the job was posted pre-COVID, that might be on hold. You never know. So you gotta go with the flow here a little bit. I recommend waiting until after the spring semester, taking another dive at this again when things are a little bit more balanced. So, what does higher ed look like right now outside of the job applicant process? So as someone who works in higher ed and I work with students, if you are looking at a student-facing roles, those have changed tremendously since COVID. So for example, I'm used to seeing students every day, like Monday through Friday. I plan events for students, advise students. Students were pretty much always in my office, so I'm used to seeing them. Now, I see them, but I see them remotely. And it is different. It's not the same when you have that in-person interaction. So if you're someone that really wants to work with students and you're looking for a job in higher ed, just know that right now, if you do get a position, you may have to start remotely. That means you need to be comfortable dealing with Zoom or Microsoft Teams, whatever platform that university is using, when communicating with students and even student appointments. And that also may mean that if your position requires you to plan social events, you may have to plan a social event remotely. It's not as fun as it is in person. I'm just gonna be honest with you guys. I would never like sugarcoat things for you. It is not the same. We will get through this. When that is going to happen, I don't really know. Vaccines are coming in, so that's a good thing. What is it going to look like in the fall? I don't really know. I wish I had more information for you guys, but right now it's kind of a wait and see kind of thing because we need to see what happens with the virus, obviously, right? Testing has been ramped up at a lot of places, so that's really good. This is higher ed post-COVID. And what we are seeing in reference to changes with higher ed is I'm noticing that more and more students, high school graduates, are applying for certificate programs that are online instead of choosing to come to a traditional university. Now, why is this important to you? If you are looking to work with students, this is very important to you because that can affect enrollment in universities. It just is what it is. I was doing the stats a couple of days ago. A lot of these companies like General Assembly and some of these other they're tech companies, but they teach and they do like certification programs. A lot of these companies they've implemented programs that will give students the skills that they need to get that job and not necessarily focus on extra classes that they need to have a bachelor's degree. And companies are hiring those students because they have just the skills they're asking for and they know how to do the work. So that being said, going into higher ed, you need to write out a plan for your future in higher ed, with your career. You need to plan that out. And I say this because, and this is not to scare anyone, but from what I'm seeing with enrollment, there may come a time where more and more people are choosing to not do college the traditional way, where more and more people are choosing to do this online and to not take out more money in student loans. So we got two things going on here. You got a pandemic going on, and you have students that have high student loan debt or don't want to incur student loan debt. And now you have these certificate programs that are online, they're cheaper, they're faster, doesn't take them 4 years to finish it. And so they're seeing that as another option so they can go ahead and get employment a lot sooner. So you need to plan out a vision. When I say plan out a vision, I mean like for your career in higher ed. The same way people make vision boards for like the year 2021, you need to make one for higher ed. And this is very important because if you do not have a plan and it gets to a point where your position in higher ed is no longer needed, then you might find yourself with some trouble. So you need to have a career plan. What else do you like to do? Do you like to work with students? Great. What do you like doing with those students? Do you like planning events for those students? Great. Backup plan, go into event planning. You need to have a backup plan. I could say this to anybody because higher ed is changing, and it was already starting to change before COVID, but since COVID, some students are realizing that, you know what? I like being able to just wake up in the morning and do this remotely and not have to get dressed and walk outside in the cold. It's snowing here, if you guys don't know, in the Boston area, and trek to class. I like this convenience of just being able to roll right out of the bed and just log onto my computer. And the more and more people that like doing that, the more and more people you're going to have that choose to do online programs. So if you want to still work in higher ed, you need to make sure that you do have a plan B. That is not to say that all this stuff is going to change with higher ed like in a year. But if this is what you want for your career, I think you need to be prepared just in case things do start to move in that direction. You look at the economy right now, I don't know anybody that didn't have student loans. Just being honest with you guys. I don't know anybody who didn't have some type of student loans, right? So you look at where student loans are now. You look at what people are getting paid coming out of college. You look at inflation. You look at the cost of living. People don't want to take out more student loans. It just is what it is. And if there are other options where you can get that same, education, but you can get it quicker and you can get it cheaper, case closed, right? So I do know that, like I said, a lot of you did reach out to me and ask me, like, what is it like now? What's going on now? I mean, some universities, like I said, are 100% remote. Some are doing a hybrid option. I'm not sure about the fall just yet. It's kind of like a wait and see kind of thing. But I would not consider this to be your only plan. And that's unfortunate because a lot of us really do love like working with students. One tip that I would give you if you're a little nervous about going into higher ed now post-COVID is that there are other higher ed opportunities that don't involve you working at a university. You can go into a field that I call it higher ed adjacent. And these are some of the companies that like they work with education, they work with like colleges and universities, but they're not a college or a university. A good example of this is edX. They are a techie kind of company. They're affiliated with MIT. They do things for universities and with universities in terms of, presenting their platform to them and letting universities use their software platform, but they are not a university. I highly recommend looking at higher ed adjacent companies as a backup plan. And they have all types of positions from software engineer to UX designer to customer success manager. There's so many different options with those companies. But when we talk about having a plan B, I recommend that you implement that as a plan B. Like I know so many people in higher ed that have been furloughed and they didn't have a plan B. So they've worked in higher ed like their whole career. And now they're like, what do I do now? Because I can't get another job in higher ed. So now they have to like try to switch careers. And if you've only worked in higher ed and you're trying to switch to something else, it's not that easy. You can, but it's not that easy. So make sure you do like have a plan B. All right, guys, that's all I have for you today. I hope I did not make any of you feel like, oh no, I better not do this. I just wanted to be real with you and tell you how it is. Like, you need to know, and you need to make sure that you're good, you're comfortable with that. You're okay with taking those chances or going with that. But that is pretty much it. That's all I have today, guys. Bye.